We're on, we're live, we're Think Tech. We're Think Tech Talks on Thursday in the 3 to 4 block. We're talking with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar. That's in Hilo, but Marco is not in Hilo. Marco is in California. Hi, Marco.
Hey there, Jay. Once again, great to be back with you.
Great to have you on the show at all points. What are you doing in California?
I'm here on business and seeing family and friends. I grew up here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I try to get back a handful of times a year, and I keep my finger on the pulse here as far as the PV situation here as well.
Well, what did you find on this trip? I mean, have you learned anything that you didn't know before about PV?
Well, I just got here early this morning, so it's a little bit early for me to give you.
We have to have a follow-up and find out, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, there's been news, and you've sent me, a bunch of articles and stuff that you've written and others about the condition of the solar industry in Hawaii. And, we've had an extraordinary run. The top of the numbers was 2012. 2013 has softened. So what have you found? That's the first question. Second question is why?
Well, I mean, the data showed that there has been a clear decrease in the number of photovoltaic system permits that the City and County of Honolulu Department of Planning and Permitting have been issuing these past 10 months. The last 6 months of the year, from May to October, each month was down in terms of PV permits being issued compared to the same month last year. So it's been 6 straight months of decline. I expect that to continue this month and December as well. So why is that happening? Well, it's natural that any type of industry goes through ups and downs on the roller coaster ride. And as I've said, and anybody in the business knows, we had a super monster year last year that was going to be very tough, I think, to be able to beat this year. What surprised, I think, many people is that the drop-off came as quickly as it did, and I think the two main reasons, as I've written before, are the grid saturation concerns and issues that the utilities have in terms of PV penetration into circuit after circuit and the grid as a whole, and then second, kind of continuing turbulence and question about what's going on with the state tax credit. Mm-hmm. So those are the two main factors. Yeah.
Well, what effect has this decline had on the industry? Before you answer that, can you sort of tell us what the industry is like? My impression is the industry includes some big players who've been around for a while, some medium-sized players. I guess I'd put you in that category, who've been around for a long while, who are, the old-time professionals. Some players from the mainland who are national players, and a lot of players who just got into the business from some other business, right, who are recent entries. So tell me your perception of how the pie is being divided within the industry.
Well, if you look at the records from DPP from this year alone, more than 270 contractors have pulled photovoltaic system permits in the past 10 months on the island of Oahu alone. And I think statewide that figure is probably somewhere between 350 and 400. And that, to me, is an unsustainable number of contractors that can be supported with the kind of volume that our relatively little state has. So you're absolutely right. There are a number of what I'll call kind of old-timer businesses and people, folks like me, who've been doing this for a very long time in terms of solar electric and solar in general. And I see also a lot of newcomers, and I kind of somewhat simplistically and arbitrarily divide the camp into, or divide contractors or people who are doing this into what I call the true believers, of which I consider myself one in that category, and then the opportunists. And what we've seen over the past 2, 3, 4 years, especially in the past 18, 24 months, is the dramatic increase of the opportunists coming into this industry from different trades, from out of state, And that to me is kind of the great American way. You see, as an entrepreneur, you see an opportunity in the marketplace for getting your piece of the pie, and you dive in head first, and you ride that, or eat as much of the pie as you can for as long as you can, and then as the pie shrinks, then look for other opportunities. And I think that's most likely the evolution that's going to take place in the months and the next year or two to come.
Yeah, well, we're doing a short report on what happened in that. Actually, I heard about it through you, that 4-committee hearing in the legislature in, I guess, the last part of October, where 4 committees having to do with energy and the like of the legislature convened to hear what sounded to me like complaints by the solar industry that they weren't getting their share. And what's interesting that came up on the point you make is that some of call them the opportunists, were going back to their roots. They were saying, we can't do solar anymore because of these connection problems, so we're going to go back and do what we were doing before. We have to do this to survive. And we go back to, plumbing, roofing, what have you. So for them, it's expandable and contractible almost at will. This does not give you a good feeling. I mean, do you know about this?
Well, what you're referring to was it wasn't a hearing, it was a legislative briefing that was called by a number of interested legislators, including my friend Senator Mike Gabbard, who's chair of the Energy Committee on the Senate side, a real good guy and very interested in renewable energy and environmental issues in the state. And he and other legislators called this briefing and heard from HECO representatives as well as a number of people in the PV industry from different associations. And the message they got from people in the business, in the PV business, was one of alarm and deep concern that the issues now to getting PV systems approved before they go in, which is what pretty much the new regime has been since early September, according to HECO, according to what they put out in early September, that has been a challenge for many in the industry on Oahu to be able to move forward with the actual installation of these solar projects. And just to kind of give you an idea of scale, there were 1,243 PV permits that were issued by DPP last month. And if you figure there are 21 working days, Monday through Friday, 21 working days in October, then that means that if you assume for every sold system that there is going to be a net energy metering package that will be arriving onto someone's desk at HECO, that average comes out to almost 60 per day. Net energy metering agreements per day. And if you start getting behind, or if the HECO folks, who I have no doubt are working very hard diligently to try to go through these stacks, but if they aren't able to process them as quickly as they would like to, or as quickly as the industry wants them to, then they start falling behind. And of course, then there's kind of that cascade effect that you get further and further behind, and more systems are piling up, and more contractors are hurting, waiting for HECO to tell them whether their system or that particular system is approved based on the given circuit saturation. So that appears to be the case right now, where you have a backlog that HECO is trying to work through of a lot of NEM packages that have arrived to them over the past weeks and months, and this is causing definite delays in terms of projects that have been sold and permitted to actually be installed. That's what a lot of the grief that's been expressed by various representatives of the industry over the past week.
But wasn't this something you could anticipate? I mean, if you say that there are too many installers for too little of a market, then ultimately this kind of consolidation, delay in consolidation, and failure of these contractors, I think, ultimately, or the migration of the contractors back from whence they came, this got to happen, right? It's sort of in the natural order of things, isn't it?
It is. However, it does seem apparent that part of the, or a significant part of the contributing factor to many of these contractors running out of immediate work for their installation crews to do is due to not hearing back in a timely fashion from the utility company as to whether there's room in this or that circuit or not.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a bureaucratic slowdown, a bureaucratic challenge that is been detrimental, certainly, to keeping systems being installed with confidence at a healthy clip during the busier times of the year, which the last 3 months of the year traditionally are.
That because of the federal tax credits. Yeah.
Correct, so that people can gain the benefit of both the federal and the state tax credits sooner rather than later.
Yeah. Marco, we're going to take a very short break. We'll be back in a minute. That's Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar out of Hilo, who is now talking to us by telephone in California. This is Think Tech Talks, Thursday, the 3 to 4 block. I'm Jay Fidel. We're talking about the implosion of solar in Hawaii. We'll be right back after this break.
Aloha. I'm Nicole Horry for Think Tech. For nearly half a century, the Hawaii Foreign Trade Zone No. 9 has brought the benefits of the Foreign Trade Zone program to Hawaii businesses and entrepreneurs. DBET, the Department of Business, Economic Development and Tourism, operates Hawaii's Foreign Trade Zone program to encourage international business and economic development. The Foreign Trade Zone's mission is to increase the amount of international trading activity in Hawaii, thereby providing employment opportunities for the residents of our island state. For more information, see ftz9.org. I'm Nicole Horry. Mahalo.
We're back. We're live. We're here with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar. The company's in Hilo, but Marco is in San Francisco. We're talking to him by telephone here on a Thursday from Pioneer Plaza in our Think Tech Talks regarding the implosion of solar in Hawaii. You know, one of the things that we became aware of recently are these larger projects that Hawaiian Electric is trying to organize on a negotiated basis and get waivers from the Public Utilities Commission to do approvals on, I forget, 6, 9, 10, something like that, big projects for a collective megawatt capacity of 250 megawatts. That's a pretty big deal. And not all of them will get built, but you know, there's some real action happening here. And I wonder how this integrates with the residential landscape that we're talking about, where these solar companies are having trouble. Isn't it better, frankly, just to do solar on a larger scale, on an industrial scale?
Well, that is a really juicy and provocative question, Jay, and I'll tell you why. It's been my belief ever since I've been doing this for 35 years as of this year, that solar energy is one of the most democratic energy sources on the planet. In terms, and of course, it falls more in terms of energy per square unit of area. It falls more between the tropics and, of course, less so up in the poles. But it is still, comparatively speaking, one of the most democratic power sources available to us. So I've always been a bit of a, how shall I put it, a Democrat with a small d, as far as preferring to see each and every home, each and every roof with solar modules producing both electricity and hot water, if hot water is needed, rather than taking this very democratic power source and essentially centralizing it to large power generating facilities, which is similar to the Edison model going back over 100 years ago of essentially big central power stations, which is the hub of the wheel, and then generating power through its transmission and distribution lines, which are essentially the spokes of the wheel. So we have seen with utilities across the country, and including those in Hawaii, who have been pursuing, especially with great gusto over the past several years, in pursuing these multi-mondo megawatt projects that are, whether a handful of megawatts as we've seen so far on Oahu, or up to as many as 500 or 600 megawatts, which we're seeing here in California. And I just lectured on this, in fact, yesterday in my class at UA Kilo. There are plans by other countries to go as high as 6 to 10 gigawatts, which are 6,000 to 10,000 megawatts worth of PV generating facility in a specific area. So it is a model and a preference, I believe, by a lot of utility companies that if they can have 20 megawatts here, 50 megawatts there, that is a more manageable resource, a more manageable form of power generation to them, rather than having an equivalent 20 megawatts spread over tens of thousands of roofs and a much larger distribution.
Yeah, it's an interesting dichotomy. And we're trying to connect up with Kyocera, which is getting into the panel business globally big time. We talked to them last week, and I hope to be able to talk to them again about a huge PV project they're building in Japan. And there, I don't know if you could say it's a trend, but maybe it is. One thing that strikes me, though, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to affirm that it has been a big trend over the past several years. I remember just 3 or 4 years ago that one of the largest PV facilities was in Florida back in 2009, and President Obama went there to inaugurate it. And you can find pictures of him speaking before this big array. And the size of that particular system was 25 megawatts, which would be a big system for the state of Hawaii, but I mean, it's a pea shooter compared to the hundreds of megawatts which are going in on the mainland and in European countries as well.
Where does the solar collector technology fit in these large facilities? Recall Sopaji and Darren Kimura, Big Island boy, who was trying to do big industrial solar sites, especially on the mainland and the west, I think. And I'm not sure that technology has kept up with PV. What do you know about it?
Well, what you're referring to, what Darren and his fine company are doing, have been doing over the years, and there's a facility over at the Nelha area on Kailua Kona side, close to the airport on the Big Island, is it's known as CSP, concentrating solar power. And it's using various types of mirrors and parabolic troughs to be able to take the sunlight and concentrate it. In the case of CSP, you're concentrating it on a tube that is heating a fluid to a very high temperature. So it is not photovoltaic where you're actually taking sunlight or using sunlight that's heating a semi-crystalline or some type of semiconductor and actually generating a current. So it's a fundamentally different type of solar power generation. And several years ago, CSP was considered had a lot more potential to go big in terms of size and distribution and cost efficiency. But what's happened is that the price of photovoltaic modules has come down so dramatically over the past 5 years, to the point where, I think I might have mentioned to you in a previous conversation we had, that last year the 20 largest photovoltaic manufacturers in the world, whether they were Japanese, Chinese, American, European, out of the top 20, not a single one of them was profitable last year. That was due to the fact that pricing became so low and so unsustainable.
Yeah.
So
the solar price war.
Yeah, exactly. And it's only recently I've been keeping my eye on a number of the bigger companies, such as First Solar, which is the biggest company in the world, and their stock has a market cap of somewhere over $6 billion, and that's the biggest that I know of. And they were profitable this past quarter and have been profitable this year. SunPower Corporation, which stock is also doing quite well. They're over $3 billion in market cap right now. They've been profitable over the past few quarters, so we're finally beginning to see, at least among a number of the players, profitability, which is a very good sign, because companies that are not profitable, unless you're the U.S. government, of course, can only stay afloat for so long by losing money quarter after quarter in Europe.
But it sounds like these solar large solar facilities may be at least one way to the future. And I would add, this thought that you talk about the democratization of the individual residents, so you control your own destiny and all that. But in fact, it costs plenty of money to put solar on your rooftop, with or without tax breaks.
Yeah.
And if I don't do that, then I really can't enjoy the benefits of solar unless the utility itself does it. And if the utility itself makes these big facilities in its own way, that is a kind of democratization, because everybody has the benefit. Don't you agree?
Yes, that's true. And there's also it's a good time to note that there are efforts underway, and this is something that I know Mike Gabbard is quite interested in. He wrote a letter to the editor just in the past several days to the Honolulu Star-Advertiser regarding a concept that's known as community solar.
I saw that.
You have people who are living in a condominium or an apartment and who are not able to put a PV system on their roof and have ownership of it, but to allow those people essentially to invest in, let's say, mid to somewhat large-scale PV projects that would be located elsewhere, where they could recoup part of their investment through the generation of power from that system, and also enjoy on a percentage basis, on a commensurate basis, tax credits from that. And that's something that has really been catching on in parts of the mainland, especially in the Bay Area. And I know, from what I understand from Mike, that that's something that he definitely would like to move forward during the coming legislative session.
No, that's a very creative idea. It reminds me of Frank Fosse's community gardens.
Exactly.
Which don't exist anymore, but it was inspiring when he did it. And it also raises for me, and I wonder if you have any thoughts on this, how do you permit people to do this in view of the unavailability of the wheeling kind of principle in Hawaii, where these wires are going to have to cross a tax map key boundary in order to be available to the participants? No?
Yeah, I don't have any answers to that. I think that's going to be something that's going to take time to figure out. It could take easily more than a legislative session or two to get to that point. And in terms of when that's going to be, when the community solar is going to be available to someone who's living in a condo or an apartment to take advantage of it in Honolulu or Lahaina or wherever they happen to be in the islands, I don't know.
Yeah, well, we're still finding our way for sure, and that's why I really like to talk to you and sort of get a beat on where it's going. But let me ask you this: with the travails of the call it the residential solar industry, what is the solution to that? I mean, is it simple? Is it as simple as saying we have to process the applications for connectivity faster? Now, that doesn't solve the technical problem of having too much. It seems to me that storage has got to be involved in the solution somewhere, so that the utility doesn't have this ongoing concern about not being able to handle the supply from PV. What are the solutions you would suggest?
You're absolutely right, and the reality for me is that there are no quick fix solutions at this time. I saw this day coming. I and others saw this day coming over these past several years, where essentially the utilities were going to reach a point in terms of grid penetrations by all these distributed generation PV systems of 1 or 2 kilowatts up to hundreds of kilowatts and larger, that they were going to essentially come to an internal decision saying, we have to draw the line some point soon. Where are we going to draw it, and what are we going to do from there? And they've been getting hammered in the press, and I just read a piece on Civil Beat yesterday from a woman who is complaining that now that she's ready to go solar, she can't, and she described the HECO grid as rickety old grid, I think, and I've also heard a phraseology along the lines of antiquated technology, and all kinds of colorful language, and I don't buy into that myself. But to me, the pace of adoption on the ground of people wanting to go PV has surprised the heck out of a lot of us over the past several years in terms of how dramatically it went up. And it's not just Hiko Helco Miko and KIUC who are trying to deal with questions like this, but this is happening on the mainland as well. But we're in a particularly difficult situation with our isolated grids because they are not connected and they're relatively small. So where one of the big utility companies here in California, in fact one of the biggest in the country, Pacific Gas and Electric, I mean, they have a huge grid and huge distribution system compared to Hawaii, and they are able to effectively accommodate a heck of a lot more solar because simply they have a lot bigger grid. But in Hawaii, we're cutting edge in terms of just how far can a utility go in accepting intermittent distributed generation. And you mentioned the S word, storage, and that is something which is getting a lot of attention. And there are a number of contractors who are now advertising quite prominently that, gee, give us a call, we have a solution. You don't have to deal with HECO, and you'll be able to move forward with getting a PV system without having to get in the queue or deal with any type of interconnect issues.
Well, I want to discuss that in much greater detail right after the break, Marco. This is Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar in Hilo, and he's talking with us on the phone from San Francisco. This is Think Tech Talks, Thursday, the 3 to 4 block. I'm Jay Fidel. We're talking about the implosion of solar. We'll be right back after this short break. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel, founder of Think Tech Hawaii. We are a digital media nonprofit that covers things that matter to tech, energy, diversification, globalism, and progress for our state, the state of Hawaii. We broadcast on community television and on Oceanic Cable Channel 16. We also stream our shows and interviews live on the internet as both radio and video, and of course we post them here on YouTube. We collaborate with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association to present monthly luncheon programs on subjects of interest to the business community. And we write for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. ThinkTech works hard to raise public awareness in Hawaii. Check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and come to our YouTube channel, Think Tech Hawaii. We hope you support our mission and that you like our work. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo. Okay, we're back. We're live. We're here with Marco Mangelsdorf of Provision Solar. It's in Hilo, but he joins us by phone from California. I'm Jay Fidel. We're talking today about the implosion of solar in Hawaii, which is a topic we need to follow because the solar is the most dynamic of all the renewables right now. So, Marco, just to clarify, the grid has a certain innate resilience to adding additional renewable energy, but without solar, that resilience doesn't go very far in Hawaii, right?
Well, you have as I've said many times before, and I think this is just kind of obvious, but somehow a lot of people just don't seem to remember to really get it, that the grid is finite. You do not have and cannot have and will never be able to have, at least I don't think in our lifetime, an infinite amount of power or infinite amount of power sources feeding into a finite grid. So that's something that seems to escape a lot of people, especially, kind of rightly so. You get folks who have been waiting a month or two or a year or two and say, God, by golly, I'm ready to go solar. I'm really excited. My neighbor got it. My tutu got it. My auntie got it. And now Hiko's telling me I can't get it. Well, that's not right. Mm-hmm. And then I can certainly understand that disappointment, but they're just unable to really comprehend that, well, unfortunately, at this point, that particular circuit is got as much PV as it can handle right now until other means and other equipment and upgrades can be done to be able to allow it to accommodate more PV.
Well, yeah, so I'd really like to take a moment here and ask you, what happens when, everybody, including Tutu, gets to put as much net energy metered extra renewable energy on the grid and would just go free-for-all? What happens to the grid? What's the worst-case analysis there?
Well, I can't give you specifics because I'm not a utility engineer, nor am I an electrical engineer. But the utility makes the stand that it comes down to safety and reliability. And I can't give you the where, 2-4s, and the specifics about that.
No, but I don't think anybody knows the exact line. We're still learning about this. But at some point in the continuum, the reliability fails. Right? Isn't that what happens?
Yes, and that is something that, of course, no one wants to see. I mean, the utilities, any utility typically will take very seriously its responsibility as a typically publicly regulated monopoly to provide reliable, safe, dependable power to its customers. And, when people's power goes out for an hour or two, let alone for half a day or longer, I mean, that affects people in a very dramatic way.
And business.
And businesses as well, of course.
Well, that's the thing, people make a lot of assumptions that it'll be fine no matter what, the utility be able to deliver reliable power no matter what. But then you have to remember, the various occasions in recent years when there's been a blackout for one reason or another, and put your hand on the switch and there is nothing there.
Right.
And I think all these fellows get all angry when they think they're paying too much or they're not being allowed to connect with their solar system. But they're going to be a lot more angry if there's no power at all.
I agree. And again, this notion that, it's an antiquated infrastructure and it's a rickety old grid and all sorts of other colorful language that people have come up with is just, to me, just not accurate of what they are, the current utility grids in the state represent in terms of how far the utilities have come just in the past handful of years in terms of being able to accept more and more and more PV.
Yes.
I'm not they should stop and say, well, that's it, we're not going to take any more. They are working actively to see what they can do. It's just, Jay, it's just not coming at a fast enough pace in terms of the fixes. And there's no such thing as wave your magic wand and, smart grid from one day to the next, and therefore that will allow everybody and anybody to be able to interconnect. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to shift gears for a minute, Marco, and talk about something that's come up in the news, which is I'd like to sort of get a reality test from you on this. Is there have been various reports, and including a reaction by Hawaiian Electric, reports that some of the installers have been deceiving customers to tell them that they don't need approval, or that approval is forthcoming and guaranteed, or one deception or another, in order to induce them into buying PV systems. And then the installer puts in the system, the customer finds out that he was misadvised, and it all turns sour. And these reports have gotten into the media. So how real is this? What is the dimension of the problem? What is happening here? What do we do about it?
I think there are always going to be more stories and kind of anecdotal reports that are to be kind of difficult to track down and to really pinpoint compared to the number of concrete, explicit stories and reports that we can really nail down. And what we do know is that there are one or more PV contractors that are installing PV systems without yet receiving approval from HELCO.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, from HECO in this particular case.
Mm-hmm.
These PV companies are essentially trying to cover themselves by asking the homeowner, in one particular case, asking the homeowner to sign a contract addendum acknowledging that they would be on the hook for any kind of utility fees or costs or studies or upgrades required. To me, there's certainly an element of risk in this kind of practice. There's the unknown additional cost factor. And even worse, what if ultimately HECO denies approval for this or that system for 6 months, for a year, or longer, as a study is being done or they're trying to figure out what they can and should do? And imagine how that's going to go over with a homeowner. So that's what the most recent press reports have been, and there was a report on KITV News a couple of days ago
Yes.
along those lines, and that to me shows an element of desperation on the part of a number of contractors trying to keep their crews busy and trying to go beyond the wait that they're experiencing from HECO in terms of submitting X number of net energy metering agreements to HECO as required as of the beginning of September, and waiting for the response. So that appears, like I said, to be a reality with one or more contractors, and it's like I said, certainly a gamble in my opinion, because putting a system on a roof at a substantial expense and taking money from a homeowner, at least for partial payment, if not full payment, where there is an element of doubt as to whether that system ultimately will be hooked up and accepted and approved by HECO in a timely fashion, that really concerns me.
Well, let me ask you sort of what seems to me to be a solution. Let me ask you whether this possibility would work. Suppose you put the PV on the roof, and you put a device, on the wire that will send power into the grid and back to Hawaiian Electric. And you say, look, Hawaiian Electric doesn't have to take that power unless it wants it or needs it or can accommodate it. Okay, so you are getting the PV, the benefit of the PV all day long. At night, you're going to have to buy PV from the utility. It may not be as good a deal, but most of the day you're getting free PV energy off the roof. Then at night you're buying, and the utility is only going to buy it from you when it needs it. And all this would require, maybe it's more complicated than I say, but all this would require is the ability of the utility to say yes or no, we'll take PV or PV power or not. Why can't this be a solution?
Well, and practically speaking, Tay, if I understand you correctly, what you're talking about is essentially a disconnect on the output of the photovoltaic system before it is feeding power into the distribution system of the home.
Yes.
And that disconnect would be electronic. It would be controllable by HECO in this case, either through power line communications, where they could send a signal over the power lines themselves, or it would be via some type of radio frequency.
Yes.
And that is something that I believe that they are looking at. They already have implemented that type of scheme for larger commercial systems of,
yes,
say, 100 or more kilowatts, and they are looking into that possibility for less than 10 kilowatt NEM systems as well. But and that may very well be the best short-term solution that we have available to us now. But the downside of doing that, let's take a step back. The upside is that would allow the utility companies to accept probably substantially more PV into their grid. That's a good thing. That's not disputable. That would be a good thing for all concerned.
Mm-hmm.
On the downside would be that those new customers who are getting a system like that will have this remote controllable disconnect, means they would essentially be in a new tier or a new category of net energy metered customers, where they would be needing to explicitly acknowledge and accept the possibility that at given moments in time, as per utility conditions, that the output of their system could be disconnected. Therefore, the power production of their system would be curtailed.
Okay,
And
it would cost
how
them money. The net effect is it would cost them money. They wouldn't make as much money from the utility for essentially selling power to the utility.
Well, again, not selling power, Jay, but having credits provided to them for power that the utility receives.
Okay, yeah, okay, but this is not a disaster. This would be just a matter of dollars and cents, And that I don't want to sell my idea here, but it strikes me that that problem could be ameliorated by having that same homeowner buy a storage system. And when he's shut down from providing to the utility, he can store it. And thus he can have the benefit. It's not lost, you know.
Right. Right. That, I mean, conceptually, that's something that should be able to be designed, I would think.
Okay, well, you and I can collaborate on the design, okay?
We'll share in the patent royalties.
Before we finish, I just wanted to get your early thoughts on the legislative session coming up in January. Certainly, the solar credits are going to be at issue. How do you see, solar energy unfolding in the 2014 session?
You know, it's always interesting to try to prognosticate, what issues are going to be really in the forefront in terms of any new session. And, we'll most likely be POW with the gay marriage issue. I haven't looked at the news today, but I assume that it hasn't passed the House yet in terms of the final vote. But we'll likely be through that particular issue, and what issues will be at the forefront of the minds of the House reps and the senators. And I think energy issues are kind of a perennial hot topic, and I believe that sometime in January, most likely, Department of Taxation will be announcing the estimated or the calculated hit on the state's general fund from tax year 2012 from the renewable energy tax credit, which there's no disputing that it's going to be a record amount compared to previous years, because 2012 was a record year in terms of PV and in terms of people taking the tax credits. The only thing in doubt is how much of a record it's going to be. And I believe that there's going to be an awareness of that substantial amount, and there will be probably some continuing lingering backdrop, perhaps, of the black eye that the industry is giving itself with these reports of contractors engaging in questionable behavior. And when you've got those type of issues in the background, you're more likely to get legislators who will be more prone to questioning whether the tax credit is something that should be sunsetted, which right now there is no sunset date for expire. And also the question of, it's been 35% now, which is a substantial amount for X number of years, and perhaps it's time to fine-tune that and to start ramping it down. So that was the direction that the bill, Senate Bill 624, that came close to making it to the governor's desk but failed in Conference Committee in early May. That was the direction that part of that bill at least was going in terms of putting a sunset date and also decreasing the percentage over the next years.
Any thoughts on, assuming there's pressure for a ramp down, any thoughts on how and over what period of time, what increments that should be accomplished?
Oh, gosh, I mean, there's a fair amount of dispute in the industry on how quickly it should be ramped down and how dramatically. And I don't believe that there is there's far from a complete consensus. I'm of the view, and you and I think have talked about this before, but I'm of the view that a tax credit is something that should not typically be kind of a perpetuity and a handout of perpetuity, at least a tax credit of this kind. And it was meant, in my opinion, to achieve a level of mass adoption and cost reduction that takes place through mass adoption to allow the industry to more fully stand on its own with decreased government support. And yes, I am fully aware of arguments that can be made, and two good friends of mine have made to me that, well, oil is subsidized, natural gas is subsidized, coal is subsidized, nuclear is subsidized. There ain't no such thing as a energy playing field that's completely level. And there's never going to be a completely level playing field in energy as far as I believe. But that said, I think there is certainly a case that can be made and should be made and is being made that after 30 7 years of having a solar tax credit, and that's when the first one was enacted back in 1976, that it is time to really have some serious discussion as to whether a tax credit, especially of this kind of generous level of 35%, whether that should continue for much longer.
Well, that's a good reason for us to continue to have a serious discussion on all these issues going forward. I greatly enjoy our discussions, Marco. I look forward to doing this with you at reasonable intervals right on through the year. Thanks so much for joining us.
Hey, thank you so much.
This is Marco Mangelsdorf, Provision Solar. He joins us not from his headquarters in Hilo, but from San Francisco by telephone. Think Tech Talks, Thursday, the 3 to 4 block. I'm Jay Fidel. We've been talking with Marco about the implosion of solar, and we'll be back in a few minutes to talk about Asia in Review with Kerry Gershonik standing in for David Day. Aloha. Thanks again, Marco.
Hey, thank you, Jay.